Donald Trump's State of the Union address, given last night at the time of the production of this video, was a disaster. And it's going to backfire. I'm going to explain in this video precisely why it's going to backfire. Now, we saw a lot of enthusiasm that came from the Republican members of Congress, a lot of patting on the backs, a lot of handshaking and glad handing. However, I don't think they're really thinking this through as they should be. While it's important to do things in such a way that you bolster morale, it's also quite another thing to be detached from reality. So, in other words, if we have, just for example, a really great high school football team who's about to play a National Football League team, all of the enthusiasm in the world, in all likelihood, is not going to result in something positive for that high school football team, aside from maybe just making the effort. I think that's important to delineate. I like to call Donald Trump, if I were to give him a mob name, because you know people in the mob, they have these handles and they have these names, like Anthony Gaspipe Casso. I like to call Donald Trump Donnie Pom Poms, because he has a lot of propensity, and he exercises that propensity very routinely. He waves his pom-poms, and last night certainly was no exception. And he came out before the American people. And let's be clear, there is no other broadcast where the President of the United States has more eyes on himself or herself, as the case may be, than the State of the Union address. And he knew that. This was, given his very, very poor standing in the approval polls, I've seen them as low as 36% approval, some of them about 40%. So somewhere in there it's a pretty lackluster approval rating. And here comes Donald Trump, and he's saying, guess what? We're doing all that winning. We're doing so much winning that we don't know what to do about it. Okay. Now, let's look at the average person. The average person, 60% of the people in America are living hand to mouth. Life is hard. They're probably, those same people are maybe one broken arm away from disaster. Nobody ever went bankrupt in Canada from having to go into the hospital for surgery. But it happens in the United States. So people are one paycheck away from very, very challenging circumstances with their finances. One paycheck that they miss, one paycheck that, perhaps it does not get realized because of circumstances. That's how tight the American people are. the vast majority of them. As I said, to the tune of 60%. Now, here's why that State of the Union address is not going to fly. The reason why Donald Trump used this as an opportunity, I think the GOP and Donald Trump viewed this as a figurative Hail Mary pass very late in the game, and they were thinking, okay, we're going to score a touchdown with this. And I think the opposite happened, because when you're glad handing and saying all that winning, we don't know what to do with all this winning. Are they forgetting that the average person is looking at them and saying, I haven't got a clue what you're talking about? Because when I look at my household budget, I'm not winning. When I look at my credit card statements, I'm not winning. When I look at my bills, and when I look at my grocery bills and my rent and perhaps my mortgage payment, I have no clue what you're talking about when you're saying we're winning. The only person or the only entity that is actually winning in this situation is to some degree the government of the United States of America, because they have installed and imposed tariffs on their own citizens. I think the GOP likes to say, well, we're imposing tariffs on Canada, and we're imposing tariffs on Norway, and we're imposing tariffs on Sweden and all these other countries. When in fact, we got to ask the question, who is paying the tariffs? It's the people of the United States at the cash register. That's who's paying the tariffs. So people are paying more to sustain their life, and they're living hand to mouth. And remember, they're one or two paychecks away from disaster. And nothing, absolutely nothing, resonates more poorly than grandstanding in front of these people and saying, we're doing all this winning. There were other things about the State of the Union address which I think is noteworthy and should be mentioned. There was a patriotic component to this, and that patriotic component was by design. There was a recognition of the necessity to bring some emotion into this State of the Union address,